Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching this. Welcome back to another episode of the Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart of Midlothian. For everyone that is joining us on the YouTube or via our Spotify as well, we do hope you are all good and well, and thank you for joining us at whatever part of the day you are joining us. It'll be myself, Ewan, and Alan back for this episode. So, a very big hello from the both of us. Obviously, it's been a busy, turbulent January so far concerning games, contract renewals, transfers in, transfers out. But we have got you all at the cupboard and we'll get through as much as we can during this episode. So, as always, guys, before we start, just with the necessities, as I mentioned just there, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube page or our Spotify, please think about checking it out, as well as our socials as well, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky as well. Please check all those out. They will all be in the description for your viewing pleasure. And yeah, we can get cracked in to what has been happening throughout the last few weeks. So, Alan, it's probably been about 2 months since I've actually seen your face, but how is everything? You all good?
Yeah, mate, I'm good. We were just talking about it just before we came on here. It feels normal, but also not at the same time. Obviously, you had a bit of a break from things, and delighted that you're back. Obviously, absolutely delighted to have you back. John was fantastic in the interim, and
Mhm.
I'm sure he will be on the subs bench as and when required. But yeah, it feels like we're back in old times again, and it's great to have you back, and hopefully your return. It's quite interesting. Hopefully, while you've been away, Hearts have been rubbish, and you've come back at a time when we've started getting points again. So I don't want to say that there's some correlation there, but there might well be.
That's some really hopeful thinking there, buddy. I mean, as you just said there, I will like to thank John as well for stepping up and being absolutely fantastic. Use both were. But as we also said before the start, it feels like I do not know what I'm doing. Everything just feels new now. So hopefully it'll be one of many to actually come. But as I said, Alan, I guess we can start with the game the weekend away up in the pittodrie, where it ended a stalemate at 0-0. Obviously, we don't have to go through every single detail, but just something that I did want to start with, like in the correlation to the game as well. You know, obviously, like for the last few months, as I've been watching on the sidelines as well, with the anarchy that happened like a couple of weeks ago, and Hearts fans calling out Critchley, the squad as a whole, the board and Budge, everybody just wanting them out and out very quickly. But obviously, there is a due end process for those kind of things to happen. But just coming back to the squad and with the way that Critchley wants us to play, he mentioned, at the post match that, you know, we looked like the team that he wants us to actually be after the Aberdeen game. Now, I'll be very honest, I still don't know what that actually looks like. I don't know what Critchley's sort of vision for the Heart squad that he wants to actually have. That might include, a certain style of play, obviously certain players that have the ability to actually do what he wants and how he wants us to actually play. But just like before we go into details of the actual game, do you have any idea in terms of how Critchley actually wants us to actually play, or is it a kind of trial and error basis in terms of as he plays more and more and more games, he'll have a more kind of view on how he wants us to actually play, or just like him? Do you think he hasn't got an absolute Scooby on how he wants us to play?
think it's interesting. I think like never really thought about it, but I think at the start, like when he came in, he was talking about that high intensity kind of press and getting after it and talking about playing on the front foot and all that sort of stuff. But I think it kind of proved quite early on that we just don't have the players to play that game for 90 minutes. Like we don't have, like I think John and I spoke about it before about it being similar to sort of like the Liverpool gegen pressing kind of vibes. We don't have the players with that energy to do that for 90 minutes. And I think Critchley kind of noted quite early that we'd have maybe a good 45 minutes and then the second half we'd fall off, or we'd have a good hour and then for the last half hour we'd fall off. So I think I'm not saying he sacrificed that because there are still elements of that pressing, but it's not as intense as it was when he first came in. But I think what I've noticed, and he speaks about it a lot, is about getting balls into the box and getting quality balls into the box and having strikers in the box that can finish it. That seems to be a big part of what he wants us to do. Maybe because he's looked at the strengths that we have and went, we've got players that can deliver a good ball into the box. We just need a finisher. And I think, again, we've spoken about it previously about like Penrice and Spittle being two players that can deliver a ball into the box. Danda can as well, although he's got limited minutes at the moment. It's I don't I kind of agree with you in a bit about it sort of being trial and error. I think, obviously we can't ignore where we are in the table, but I think there is an element of Critchley is looking at it going, right, what can I do with this team that makes it effective now? Like, will it be that way next season if he's still in the job? Will we be able to sort of change the system in a summer, because there's going to be a lot of turnaround in players in the summer as well. So that could have an element in it. I don't know whether he's just kind of making the most of what he's got now to be able to kind of, again, utilize what he has now to get us enough points to get us out of trouble.
I mean, in that same sense, like sense as well, like one of the standout kind of themes I saw, especially during the Aberdeen game, like because at the moment we've not really got that attacking, striking threat at the moment. It's not to say like it's not to speak down upon like the likes of James Wilson and drama as well. I think for what Wilson has done and taking his age into account as well, I might be wrong as well that he's the highest goal scorer in the squad at the minute. I might be wrong on that one, but I think at some point he was. And I think was it drama as well as starting to show glimpses of what he can do as well. Obviously, I think there's still a long way for him to actually go to be, a real striking threat. But just as a whole, compared to what we had last season as well under Naismith, I think like a recurring theme that I keep saying is that both Ed Penrice and whoever we have at right back, that be Oyugoki or Ed Forrester, the kind of the start of that attacking threat seems to be like the fullback just like sort of at the bombing down on the far side to then, as you said, get those balls in to the box and try and actually create something. And I think it is worth noting as well that Ed, especially for the last 4 weeks, I would say that Penrice has been an absolute standout during those games as well. I know that his start to his Tynecastle, the career wasn't amazing. Like it wasn't bad, but in terms of trying to ground himself and being confident within himself, like he's really started to show to be a good, solid, fullback. And I think, as like you said as well, I think to start that attacking threat, it's really starting to be created from the actual back. But again, if that's maybe because, as you said, he's not got maybe the players to kind of utilize what he wants to actually do, and then trying to think of other ways to create it. But would you say that that's a fair sort of like assessment, or do you think that we have still got enough in the squad to kind of to create those those attacking styles of play, like if it's from like like from the middle of the park, or just like for example, how could you just like sort of like zinging it across the park and then just starting something from there?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I think you can look at the Critchley system and sort of see very quickly that that is where the outlet is the pen races, and I think Oyegoki is all right at it without being brilliant. I think against Aberdeen he had some moments that were good and some that were not so good. I like Forrester, but again, is he a long term option? I don't know. But considering he's come through the academy and stuff, there's an element of it's not really a risk if it works out for him or if it doesn't. It's
Yeah,
not like we've
sure.
paid money for him effectively. But I think, and it's annoying if Taylor hadn't got injured at the start of the season, I would love to have seen him in that right
Yeah.
back position, given that license to get forward, like Penrice does on the other side. But it is, and I think, like you talked about, like Musa and stuff, and I don't. I'm not saying I don't like Musa. I think he's raw for a player that's 23. I think he's raw at this level. And that's something like if he was maybe a teenager, and 23 is still very young for a footballer, I'm not going to write him off, but I think if he was maybe 18, 19, I could maybe look at him and go, yeah, he's raw. He's a raw diamond. He's somebody that we're trying to mold into something. But it's sort of similar with Vargas. These are guys that have come here without question to use it as a springboard to get their next move, which is totally fine. Vargas kind of made that perfectly clear before, that that's why he's here, sort of thing, and that's fine. But if you see something out of them, you can go, yeah, okay, we can work with that. And I think Musa has something. I don't know what that something is, but he certainly has something. He's a hard worker. I'll give him that. He's a hard worker. He gets up and down the pitch well, defends well, gets forward well, but he's just lacking something. And I think obviously we can't ignore the fact that our top goal scorer for the last 2 years has just decided to stop scoring goals. It does kind of highlight just how important he was to us over those last 2 seasons, that he's fallen off a cliff and taken the rest of our attacking with him. But even guys like Forrest, who I love, have been nowhere near as effective as they were previously in terms of their numbers and outlay. Like you said, James Wilson is the top goal scorer. I just quickly looked it up and I'm pretty sure it's still correct, that he is the top goal scorer. So it just shows you that that's kind of where we're at. But I do think, obviously we've not really spoken about January yet and we'll go more into it. I think this is a window that Critchley has looked at it and prioritised the back rather than the front. And some people might disagree with that. I think quite a lot of people would say, oh, we need to be signing forwards. And he's chosen to prioritise defenders at least early in the window, with the signings that we've made so far and the ones that are rumoured to be coming in. So you can maybe look at that and go, like Critchley himself has said, you can't fix every problem in one window. But it's I feel like the fact that I think we've not scored more than 2 goals in a game for a very, very long time. I don't even think we've scored 2 in that many. I think it's been 1-0s and, draws and obviously defeats. But we need to find something. And I do think that Critchley is trying to work with what he has. And listen, the last few weeks have been an improvement, because obviously we've been winning. In the Aberdeen game, we should have nicked it at the end, but we'll again talk about that after. But I think the early days of Critchley, I was a little bit, right, what are we seeing? How is this going to work? And I think he's learned a lot about the players in the defeats and in the Ross County one being the biggest, I would say. Obviously, that was a draw, but it felt like a loss. He'll have learned which players he can trust, and he's looking at those players and going, right, these are the guys that I like. These are the guys I want to work with. So how am I going to get them to work? If that makes sense.
I get you on that one. Yeah, like I mean, uh, obviously, like I'll make this quite was it Ed brief because we'll let to bring it back to the actual game, but you know with Critchley in general, like I'm still in kind of two minds about it, whether he will be the man to take us forward, if that makes sense. Like I'm not particularly saying that he's necessarily going to take us backwards unless we do get was it Ed to put down in to the championship. But regardless of that, ever I mean, I would argue that would maybe be slightly, not by much, but I'd argue that we'd be slightly better off with Naismith still in the hot seat. But like that's just my own opinion. But you know, with Critchley, I just don't see what it is that he's trying to bring in. Like I know you pointed out some aspects of like the style of play he's trying to bring in, the kind of players he's like trying to bring in as well. But you know, I obviously don't think we're going to get Ed, was it Ed to put down? Like, I mean, I'm going to say that we're not going down, and but I think as of now, where the league table stands, there's only like 5 points between us and a top six place as well. And if you want to be more ambitious than that, I think it's only like 12 or 13 points away from it's either Dundee United or Aberdeen. So if we really wanted to be like striving, you know, like I mean that's a great aim to have, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting transfer window, like regardless. And obviously, as you said, we'll talk a bit about that in a wee bit. But just to coming back to the game, I thought the second half just like the whole performance from both teams just fucking dropped off a cliff. I thought the first half was actually quite entertaining. Like I thought there was a lot of good football played from at the both ends. I thought there was a lot of good individual battles as well, which I thought was great. I thought like again as we mentioned, I thought Ed the Penrice was fantastic during that game. I thought Devlin had a decent game as well. The defense I thought were relatively solid as well. Again, and
Yeah.
and again it just comes back to that lacking the quality in the final third to actually score a goal.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think like it's one of those games, and I kind of spoke about it previously about Aberdeen and the fact that they're in such bad form at the moment. It felt like obviously we've not won at Pittodrie since what 2016, 2017, one of
Yeah,
those,
something like that.
and that shows you that our record there is just not good enough and needs to get better. And I think Aberdeen having a bit of an injury crisis that they have at the moment, plus their form being horrendous, it felt like a really good time for us to go there and get a win. But again, like you say, that the lack of attacking threat was clear. We were working into good places, but just not having that final touch, which is annoying. And you can see, like, I've spoken about James Wilson already, but you can see that he's a young guy that is playing a lot of football, and that's great for him. It's great for his development, but he looked shattered, and it's a lack of another option, a lack of somebody else. I think the bigger sort of point for me that I wanted to make about the Aberdeen game, and it's something that is blatantly obvious. Liam Boyce being allowed to leave 24 hours before the game when we don't really have anybody else that can do what he does in that position that he plays. When I saw that move finalised, I kind of thought, okay, so what are we going to do against Aberdeen? Like and I'm not suggesting that Liam Boyce is the answer to all the prayers and that because we've sold him, we're going to get relegated. But the last few weeks when he's been playing, he'd been linking up well with Wilson in front of him and he'd been linking up well with George Grant behind him. And it's that sort of holding the ball up and moving it and quickly moving it as well, that Grant does from deeper, but doesn't do when he's pushed further up, which is what we did against Aberdeen. And I just felt that George Grant wasn't as effective. And I think, Wilson was, for a large part of the game, Wilson was kind of a bit of a lost cause up there by himself, and he didn't really have a lot of support, which again Boyce had given him the last few weeks. But again, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that Liam Boyce is the answer to all the problems, and I'm not going to go down to the plaza with bed sheets asking why they sold him. I think John's probably down there as we speak, or he's maybe crying into his Liam Boyce shrine in his house. I had a lot of conversations with John about Liam Boyce, as you know. But yeah, I think we just looked a little bit off balance up front. And I think that's kind of been the issue that we've had for a lot of games this season. But like you say, the battles in the game were good. I thought the Aberdeen winger, that Keskinen, he looks a player, but Penrice did well up against him. I think from a Hearts point of view, defensively, you mentioned it. I thought we looked very good. I thought Jamie McCart making his full debut came in and looked solid. So that looks like a nice acquisition for the second part of the season. But yeah, again, like you, I liked what I saw in most part of the game. I thought we controlled it for large spells, but to be fair to Aberdeen, they carried their own threats as well.
I mean, yeah, I think just to quickly touch on the boys like sort of issue as well. Like, obviously, I know that we'll touch on it when we go into the January stuff, but you know, it just goes to show that I know that he had one or two appearances when Critchley came in, and I'll be honest, like he wasn't at his best. Like, let's say I had to put it that way, but the last few games when he's been called upon, I think a lot of the Hearts fans forget, and you mentioned it so many times, how he might not be the best like sort of finisher. He might not be the most fastest in the team, but he's such an intelligent football player. Especially for our game as well. And as you mentioned as well, like to pick out link up play between Wilson as well. Like especially it showed in the county game. That massively helped the Wilson as well. And I think on the other side of it as well, granted, I know that the timing of it was a bit strange, but I kind of I kind of thought that deal made sense. Like with what
Yeah,
he was down to his last 6 months as well. It obviously wasn't reported that we got a fee for him, but obviously we would have no matter how low it was. But I think I think Blythe is always going to be remembered in that sense because he did a lot of good for that Heart side and a lot of memories as well to go back on, like things like his debut, like against Rangers as well to score at the winner, that the penalty against Hibs in the semi final as well. So he's done a lot of good, like for this
yeah,
football club, and I do hope that he does well in whatever time he's got left on the pitch, but to actually do well at Derry City. So um, just kind of going back to it as well, and like I mean, yeah, again, like I'll try to keep what I want to actually say until we go and talk about all the January stuff, but um we got to see our new unknown striker as well in Elton Kabangu. I mean, with his first touch as well, like he almost scored them the opening goal. Obviously, it was only for about half an hour, so you can't really judge him on that um, performance. But based on the time that we did see him for, how were your thoughts on him?
yeah. I liked the look of him. I thought when he came off the bench and he looks like a number nine. He looks like a handful. He looks like somebody that'll put himself about. But again, he doesn't look like a target man, hold up kind of player. But he certainly looks like somebody that will be that penalty box finisher, which is maybe kind of what we need. And it marries in with Critchley talking about getting balls into the box, and he spoke about where Elton likes to play, which is in that 6 yard box. Being in a position to put that ball away, which is what we need. But yeah, you're right. He was very, very unfortunate to not score, and he had the header that the goalkeeper tipped over the bar as well. He looks
Good save as well.
promising. Yeah, he looks promising. I think it's interesting, obviously, that we've got a player on loan from another side that utilise the Jamestown stuff and have ties to Tony Bloom as well. So there's maybe an element of, he was taken to USG and it's not really worked out for him there, but they've looked at him and went, do you know what, he needs somewhere where he can go and play and maybe score some goals, and hopefully that's what we can do for him. I don't know. I think there's a permanent option at the end of the loan, but I can't remember. I meant to look it up actually. I think there might be, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But no, he certainly looked a handful. But I think it'll be interesting to see what we do with him and Wilson, whether it's going to be a two or whether it's going to be one or the other. Because, like I said, Wilson looks knackered, and obviously Shankland will be back at some point if he doesn't depart in January,
I'm
which
just
I
going to
don't
say,
see happening.
Alan, to keep that train of thought going, just keep talking. I'm just going to grab my charger, sir.
No, of course, of course. I was just like, I like the look of that Elton. I think he's got something about him. But it is, you get people saying, oh, we should go for somebody that can hit the ground running and start, start getting the goals right from the off, and that's not easy to do. But I don't know, what you think, and I don't know what you felt about it. But when we got the penalty at the end of the game,
Yeah, that's what I was
obviously,
coming on to.
yeah, obviously George Grant is one of our penalty taking options. When Shankland's not on the pitch, we've seen George Grant hit many penalties, and we've seen him score many penalties as well.
Mm.
But there was an element of it for me. I'm looking at it going, Vargas wins the penalty. Do you let Vargas have it, or do you give it to the new guy because it gets him off the mark and maybe it gives him a bit of confidence? I
Yeah,
don't know. Personally, it's funny. I didn't have a problem with George Grant taking it at the time, if I'm honest. But and as well, like I can't. I was quite critical of George Grant after the game, somewhat unfairly because I watched it back and I thought, you know what, maybe I was expecting a Liam Boyce type number 10 performance, but that's not George Grant's game and it never has been. It clearly never will be. The penalty was a good save. I criticised them because I didn't think it was a great penalty, but watching it back, it actually was quite a good save. But I still feel like on a different day, maybe one of his teammates should have taken it.
yeah. Yeah, I saw this argument brought up on a few ed posts that I'd seen, and I don't think there was a wrong answer to to whom takes the penalty, because as far as I can remember on the penalties that Grant has actually taken, he's not the missed one. And as you so rightly brought up as well with Kabangu on the pitch at the time, that would have also been a right option to help himself to get off the mark as well. So, and you couldn't really ask anybody else to step up to it. I mean, you could make, I mean, I remember a point where back in like what 2019, I'm sorry, but 2019 20. I mind Halkett was at the penalty taker at one point as well. So there was a few people who could have stepped up to it, but at the time, I would probably when I saw Grant get the actual ball, I wasn't like thinking, oh, why is he taking that? Maybe if you're going to base it on his own per performance on that day, then you might think, well, like maybe not. But I didn't particularly see a reason for him to take it. But I thought when we missed it, I was like everybody else. I thought, right, he can get to fuck. No, no, his time's done. He's fucking sealed it now. Like, you know what I mean? But after, like you so rightly said, when you went back to look at it, I thought the goalkeeper all round had a good game, like for Aberdeen.
Yeah,
And I thought some of the comments that were made about Grant were, I'd say, borderline harsh. Like, yeah, I'm probably one in the camp of I wouldn't mind if Grant left this month because I think he's done all he can in terms of what he can offer as a player. And there's only so much that he can do. I think we have to play a certain way for him to shine, but
yeah,
obviously you can't do that like every single game. But I thought a point a piece was probably the right, like does it the like sort of the right call in terms of what the game actually was, yeah, it was a shame that we didn't get all three, and it was a great opportunity to kind of like end that like tawdry run and the poor results that we've had in the recent times. But I don't. Yeah, I think it was just unfortunate that
Yeah.
the penalty got saved. I think if he missed it completely and not even on target, then yeah, you would have more of an argument. But yeah, I don't think he was to blame for what happened, and I think he was probably the right choice on the actual night.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think like I say, the last few weeks, his involvement as well as Boyce's involvement have been a good reason as to why we've done a little bit better than we have been in previous weeks. But Critchley kind of spoke about them and said, these are two guys that are professionals that haven't been getting the minutes that maybe they should get, but they've put their heads down in training and they've knuckled down and now they've got an opportunity and they both get into the team. And I'm not a lover of George Grant. I think he's one of these players that we never really know where he is or like what he is basically. And then the last few weeks we've seen, oh, maybe he does play that sort of deeper number 8 role where Critchley's asked him to play, and he's actually done it quite well. The minute he gets pushed further forward and plays in that number 10 role, it's exploited and he's not as good as he was previously. So there's obviously something to that. But, and I've spoken about this with a few people, like you, I wouldn't be against it if George Grant was to leave this month, but personally, I don't think he will. I think in the summer there may be a conversation about contract or not, and I think I opened it up to people in the last episode that I did, the solo one that I did, and people sort of commented and said, the likes of George Grant and Liam Boyce are players that we should be looking for better, or at least more consistent than those two, which is maybe something to a different way of putting it. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I think the Aberdeen game. Look, if before kickoff you told me it was going to be a draw, probably would have taken it. As is how poor our record at Pittodrie is, and I know obviously Aberdeen's form's not great, but like I say, if somebody was to offer me a point prior to kickoff, I probably would have taken it and come back down the road quite happy. But the way the game played out, we've had a lot of games over the last months really where it's been missed opportunities and it's been possibilities to get points and we don't get them, and that it kind of the Aberdeen game kind of falls into that category as well a little bit, albeit a draw on reflection is a fair result. The penalty gives us a chance to nick all 3 points in a game that we didn't really deserve all three. So you do call that a missed opportunity a little bit because it's a chance to get 3 points, but penalties are a lottery, and unfortunately, it was quite a good save.
Well, hopefully, if he gets another chance to take a penalty again, it will go into the back of the net. But yeah, there was another stalemate at Pittodrie with a 0-0 draw. Now we can look ahead so far in what we've seen of January and in particular the transfer window. Now we are recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, and pretty much we've had breaking news, but in the spell of about 10 minutes, probably every Hearts fan has seen it all already, so it can be considered as old news now. But it has been confirmed that our central defender, Kai Rose, has now officially completed his move to DC United on for £600,000. And uh, I guess we can have a bit of a reaction to that, Alan. I think first of all, for the amount that we've got for him, especially when he's still on a 3-year deal, the fact that he's firmly part of the Socceroos as well. The fact he's been to a world. Sorry, Alan. Oh, hey, boys. Tough now. Thank you. Yeah, and for a time where you know there was mostly us Hearts fans, but other pundits as well, that he could be a potential seller for millions at one point, and for all as much as he's had bad patches, etc., I still feel we as a club have been a bit shortchanged there, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think 600k is a reasonable amount to justify him actually going. Maybe, there are things that we don't know. Maybe him personally did want to try something new. As it stands now, a lot of the Australian kind of part of the Heart squad are slowly like sort of fading away. One also has been apparently confirmed interest as well, which we will talk about in a wee bit as well. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it, Alan? Because I know for quite a while you were an advocate for Wells, as a main integral part of that like a backline for quite a while.
Yeah, I've always liked Kyrolls, and I think it's maybe an element of I like an underdog type. I like a player that, not everybody seems to rate. I think I think you're right in terms of being a little bit shortchanged, because he is, like you say, an international, and he's done reasonably well, out of that. So it's a strange one. I didn't expect to see him leave in this window. There were some whispers that he might go. There were some whispers he might go in the summer, just past there at the start of this season. So it's it's not been beyond the realms of possibility of him leaving, but it's a bit disappointing. And I think, Critchley obviously rated him because Critchley played him in pretty much every game that he'd been in charge for. Kyrolls was the constant, and that may well be due to the fact that the rest of the defence just decided to get injured. But you know, if he didn't rate him, he wouldn't have been in the squad. Like, he wouldn't have played. I think we can say that about Critchley. He's very quickly kind of, like I mentioned earlier, he's very quickly kind of realised which players he wants to work with and those that he doesn't. And I think Kyrolls was one of those guys that Critchley really liked and really rated. But yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, he's gone to DC United in the MLS. Maybe it's a similar. I don't know too much about it, but maybe it's a similar standard of living as what you had in Australia. Maybe being in Scotland, a different climate, etc. Maybe it's kind of taking its toll on him, and maybe he just wants to go somewhere and, like you say, try something different. But no, I always liked Kyrolls. I thought he was a player that was massively underappreciated. In Scottish football, you need to be physical. That's the one thing I will say, that he never really had. But that's not his game. That's not him. That never has been him. But he's done well regardless of that. Um, but yeah, I think it's a strange one, and I didn't expect him to leave. But he goes with my best wishes, and I hope that he goes to the MLS and absolutely smashes it, because he deserves to. There were some whispers about, like you mentioned, things behind the scenes and family matters. I think maybe it's a family member that's not well, or words that. Again, I'm not going to say whether that's true or not. It's something that were whispers, and I'd heard about it, but that may play into the fact of why he wanted to leave, maybe to be slightly closer to home. Could be the cause, for that. But yeah, I think Kai Rose is a player that did perfectly well, and I know people say, oh, he needs to get in the gym, he needs to be beefing up, etc. And I said this to John a few weeks ago about him, for what, because we were talking about Halkett, for what Kairos lacks in that physicality, he makes up for in being able to read a game and being able to be in the right place and have that recovery to get back in. Okay, sometimes he'll misjudge a header, but he does get back in. He does put himself in positions to try and defend. So yeah, it's an easy stick to beat Kyrolls with, that he's not physical, and he has been ragdolled by some forwards in Scotland, but maybe the Scottish game just didn't quite suit him. But I do think he'll go stateside and do very well for himself. 600 grand. Could we have got more? Maybe, but do you know what? You take it, especially at the moment when the squad needs investment. We need to be bringing players in. Obviously, we brought in Jamie McCart from Rotherham to basically replace Kai Rolls by the sounds of it, and he came in for less than 100 grand. So, from that side of things, it's not bad. It's not bad business when you look at it in that way.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, at first I didn't understand why we brought in like McCart at first, but I guess that kind of makes sense to us now. He is a bit of a similar build. He's had experience in the league as well, obviously with St Johnstone. And when he played against Aberdeen, like, again, it's probably a bit early to actually judge, but I thought he looked all right. So, like, if he continues to, like, improve throughout the rest of the season, then, in terms of the business aspect, then, like, fantastic. Obviously, we've already mentioned Kabangu. He'll be on loan with an option to buy at the end of this season, so we'll see how that goes. A bit of talk as well around bringing in another centre back as well. A man that sounds like the most manliest. Was it the beer ever in Michael Steinwelder? Like, you know what I mean? Like, imagine going into like a pub and saying, "I'll have a Steinwelder, please." Like, you know what I mean? You just want, you just feel magical. You feel like that no man could touch you. But I don't know where that random thought came from. But yeah, so
I mean, I've missed this. I've missed this.
I'm not quite sure if I have or not, mate. But fair play, thank you. So yeah, was it Austrian-born centre back Steinwelder, who currently plays in Sweden at the moment. I think we lightly talked about it as well, that he's 6'3", so already that gives a bit of a physical presence there. I think talks are kind of ongoing at the moment, round about for a six-figure fee. So again, we can keep everybody updated as we go along. I mean, do you actually agree with the fact to bring in another centre back, considering that we've already brought back Nielsen in from like, his loan, and by the sounds of it, Frankie Kent doesn't seem like, not immediate, but he's on the road to like being back on the pitch than not. And granted, I know we've just lost Ed Kairos as well, but do you think that it was a necessity to maybe bring in another centre back?
I think so. I think like, and I kind of looked into this as well, and I think it's to do with the Jamestown stuff and the way that they kind of analyze these things and build squads, and Brighton do it as well, in terms of you're bringing players in kind of before you need them, if that makes sense. Like
Hmm.
you almost go out in the market, and if there's a player to bring in, you get it done, and then that way, if somebody leaves further down the line, you can just step this person in. And I think there's maybe an element of that at play here. I think, obviously, again, I've spoken about Halkett already in this episode this week, but I've spoken about him a lot recently because I've been really, really pleased to have him back and impressed with him since he's come back in. But the thing with Craig Halkett is he's one injury away from a lengthy layoff again, which is something that is a concern, although he's been match fit the last few weeks, which has been positive. But you just never really know what's going to happen with Halkett. And also, Frankie Kent, like you say, I'm kind of mentioning those two because they're sort of the right-footed options, and this new lad Steinfelder would be similar. He'd be right-footed as well. I think there were some whispers, and again, whether you believe them or not, that Frankie Kent was considering going back down the road. Maybe there's a bit of homesickness there. It's not going to happen right now, I wouldn't have thought, but I do think in this guy coming in, and he's 24 years old as well, so there's maybe an element of this summer. It kind of means we don't have to get somebody in then. Is it harsh on Nielsen because we just brought him back from a loan? Yes. To be honest, it is. It's a bit harsh on Lewis Nielsen, but whether Lewis Nielsen will make the grade at Hearts is something that remains to be seen as well. Like, I'm not saying he won't, and I'm not saying that Critchley is going to bin him off before he's given him a chance to do something, but maybe it's an element of just bringing in competition and bringing in options with a view to maybe in the summer looking at that again and going, will both Halkett and Frankie Kent be at Hearts in the summer, or will one of them be away, or who knows, maybe even both might be away. Like, we don't know how big that turnaround is going to be in the summer. But yeah, I like the look of this Steinfelder guy. I think like you say, he comes across as a manly a manly 6'3" monster from Sweden. So I'll take that from Austria rather. And you know me, I love an
Man's man.
Austrian. You know me, I love an Austrian. If he's anywhere near as glorious as Peter Haring, then we'll be on to a winner with him.
Like as long as he has a headband, right?
I know. Well, I thought that, but he apparently doesn't. So I'm against the signing immediately. Either that, or
Fucking
he has to grow his hair out, Samson style, and get a headband in before he joins the club. That's the rules. That's why he's not been announced yet.
raging, aren't you? Raging. Um, Obviously, as well, it's no secret as well that we've had ongoing talks with Armstrong as well. But currently at Kilmarnock, who is out of contract at the end of the season. Again, I'm kind of neither here nor there about Armstrong. Like he kind of seems like a very kind of like Forest Danda kind of move, like playing like and like being the trying to think of an example, like being the like at the biggest fish like in a small pond, like and that makes sense. Like it's no
Mhm.
disrespect to Kilmarnock, like in that bigger because they're currently higher up than us, but yeah, I mean, I think it's probably based on the performances that both Danda and Forest have given us this season. I think that maybe kind of plays into it. But you know, if he's going to be another good option um, when it comes to the start of next season, or like we might just decide to bite the bullet just now to get some creativity on the that like on the attacking side of the squad. But I'll be honest, I can't see him coming in this month. But if we manage to get him on a pre-contract, then yeah, I think it'll be a good squad addition like to the team. And just before you speak as well, Alan, another winger was also doing the rounds as well. Was it Kazakhstan born Islam Chesnikov at 25 with his contract being up at his current club in November. Again, also quoted for a six-figure fee. In terms of those, I mean, we can go to Armstrong. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like Armstrong. I think he's a good player for Kilmarnock. I think he certainly has better output than any of our forwards this season so far. Um, but yeah, I don't think that we'll be at the front of the queue for him. Put it that way. I think there was interest from down south as well. So there's an element of maybe he goes there and gets more money. But I think yeah, I can understand why we're in for him, and I think in as much as I talk about like the turnaround of the squad and the Jamestown analytics bringing up names from here, there, and everywhere, you do still need to have that element of players that know the league and players that can settle in quicker. We've said it before. You don't want to have a squad full of project players that you don't know whether they'll work or not. So I think Armstrong would be safe in that sense. And as I say, I think he'd be an upgrade on most, if not all, of the wingers that we've currently got, which I think is why Critchley's sort of targeting that as an area to bring people in because we need that. Yeah, I don't know whether he would come in this month. I don't expect Kilmarnock would allow that. I think if he was to sign a pre-contract, that would probably be it. But again, as I say, he's not signing a new contract at Kilmarnock, so he'll be available in the summer for nothing, which is maybe why he's not left Kilmarnock yet. Maybe other clubs are looking at him going, why would we pay money now when we can get him for free in 6 months? So there is that element of it as well. But yeah, I do. I like Armstrong, and I think he could add something. He reminds me of sort of a Spittle type, the kind of player that has stood out for his club currently and could make that step up to ourselves. Although, like you say, Kilmarnock are currently above us, so there's not many that could make the step up to us at the moment, aside from St Johnstone. But yeah, it's it's a sensible link. Whether it would happen, I don't know, because as I say, I don't think we'd be the team best placed to offer him the best amount of money, shall we say, for that. But the other guy, Islam Sheznikov, that again strikes very much of a Jamestown name that's come up, that scored high on the analytics scale, which is obviously what we're kind of basing things off at the moment. It's an interesting one. The age profiles as well, 25. It's not as if he's a kid, and that's something as well that kind of has come across with Critchley's sort of players he's looking for. It's not, it's not 21, 22, 23-year olds. They're older. They're players that have put in a lot of appearances for their clubs. I was just reading there quickly on the Heart Standard. They posted up a thing about Steinfelder saying that he's due to arrive in Scotland over the weekend. So that looks like that'll probably happen then, as a case of when rather than if. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. There's still a lot of time in the window as well. We're only halfway through the month, or not even. And our next league game isn't for, I think, 10 days or something. Obviously, we've got Brechin in the Cup and then Kilmarnock, funnily enough, Kilmarnock at Tynecastle next weekend. So there's time to get players in between now and then. And if we can, then we'll be in a far better place than we currently are.
And just to kind of touch on, although obviously we've been talking about some of the potential ends. Obviously, we've talked about. I think we both know where we stand with George Grant being one more of the highlights in terms of players we would not like to see go, but wouldn't mind it if he did. Obviously, it's no brand new news that our former right back was it at the Colombian right back, shall I say, Salazar, went back to his the parent club, which it makes sense, because he wasn't actually playing, and it frees up a wage as well. I mentioned this to you, for as much as he got a game, and I mean a game. I personally still think that he never really got a fair chance to see what he can do. I know that can obviously maybe fall to the various circumstances in terms of, if he didn't look amazing in training, if he, if both Naismith and Critchley didn't fancy him, even though it was Ed Critchley. Even though it was Naismith that actually was Ed that brought him in, but hey ho. But he went home, saves a wage, so I guess in that sense it makes sense. Obviously we've mentioned the boys as well, and I guess before we touch on the next fixture, which is on Friday, in the Scottish Cup. You mentioned a couple of days ago as well. Obviously, these two attacking I was wingers that have not featured as much in the Barry Mackay and Yutaro Oda. I'll be very honest. The Barry Mackay, I think his form has kind of carried on from what it was last season. I think the second half of last season, I think he started to be a no-show. I always kind of saw him as that player that even if he was in the starting 11 or if he was on the bench, he could be that impact man that can create something if we needed to. That kind of spark that he once had is just it's just not been seen for quite a while now. Whether he goes this month or in the summer, I personally probably don't think he'll go. I don't think there'll be too many teams knocking on the door for his signature, just based on the form that he's had for the last sort of a bit or so. Oda, I want him to still work. He still seems like a player that has got a lot of potential. But again, like you said with the Royals, in terms of the actual nature of the Scottish game, who knows? Maybe it's just not his style suited to Scottish football. Like, like again, it's not to say that it's solely down to this, but he's like, he's not got a lot about him like in terms of his the body weight. But obviously, if you're an attacking like Ed was it Ed the was a winger, you then need to have a lot of meat on you. But I think in terms of like his overall game, you know, there's still a bit to be desired, and I think maybe going to a different club, whether that be like back at home or if it's somewhere else in the world, to actually you know get himself a bit more kind of accomplished as a player, then I think he could turn into something quite good. But for the moment and for the time that he's been here, like he's been kind of on the fringe, and he's not had that spark. Like he's not had that consistency of games to actually say like he's an absolute starter, like for him for the next game. But he's like to quote like your favorite saying, he's kind of on the fence. Like with Oda, but in terms of like on the other end with the Kai, like, I don't see him being past here for like for next season personally.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Mackay, I don't really need to add much on what you said. I think he's a player that Critchley obviously kind of clocked quite early and was not going to be up to it for whatever reason. Like you say, the spark that he had once is not there anymore for whatever reason. I spoke about this before about there just being some players at Hearts that are just maybe at the end of their time at Hearts, and I think Liam Boyce was one of those. Um, I think Barry Mackay is very much another one. Oda frustrates the life out of me because I really like Oda. I always have done. Um, but Critchley said in an interview about him, he was excited about the player that Oda could be, and this was not that long ago. But there's obviously something as to why he's not getting minutes, he's not getting chances. I know he's obviously had an injury and come back from that, but he made a bench and then he wasn't in a squad, and then I don't think he was even on the bench for Aberdeen either. So there's maybe something going on there. I do think with obviously when we signed Tagawa, Oda and Tagawa were pals, and there was a lot, there was a connection there. Obviously, Tagawa being away, Oda's back on his own again. It's maybe made him feel a wee bit unsettled, maybe not having that friend with him anymore. So there's potentially that. I think you're right, though. I think if Oda wants to flourish and wants to take his game on again, then maybe he does need to leave. It's the sort of thing, and it's the sort of player that I would love for us to loan out, or at least to have the luxury to loan him out. But where we are right now, we don't have that luxury, unfortunately. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if one or both of those players do go in January. I think the thing with Barry Mackay that annoys me, and like you said it yourself, there won't be a long list of suitors for him. He's not earning pennies. Barry Mackay will be one of the top earners at Hearts, and for him to
Mm-hmm.
sit at the club for the rest of the season when he's not going to play, let's be honest, he's not going to play because Critchley's not even put him in squads. He's not going to play. He's going to be sitting earning his money. And I think Liam Boyce is another one that would have been on the higher end of the scale of wage earners. So
Yep.
for him to move on is a positive. And obviously, it's a good move for Boyce to go home and his family and all the rest of it. But Barry Mackay needs that. And I don't know where that move comes from, like you say. Oda has in his corner that he's young, he's raw, he can develop. So there's maybe a market for him somewhere. There was a link with him to move home, but again, I don't know. We'll just wait and see. But I think as well, Critchley didn't completely close the door on both players. He kind of said, and again, he used Boyce and Grant as examples of players that have been on the fringes of squads, and when they've been given an opportunity, they've taken it. Certainly over the last few weeks, but Oda needs to be given that opportunity, but he also needs to earn it. You can say that the forward line that we're putting out every week isn't producing, and if Oda can't get in because of that, there's something there.
Yeah.
Like we spoke about Musa earlier on. I'm not saying I don't rate him. I think there is definitely something to him, but I think Oda is further along development wise than Musa is. and yet Musa's getting played and Oda isn't. So there's obviously reasons as to why that's happening as well. So yeah, long story short, I really like Oda. I hope he doesn't leave, but if he does, I could totally understand why that would happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we kind of wrap things up on the transfer, like sort of at the market, as we stand, it was also a very important contract extension that was announced as well with uh, Xander Clark penning a 3-year deal with Hearts as well, which I thought was it's great to see, but it was so important to get him locked down. Uh, Gordon has kind of been a tiny bit hot and cold in terms of his performances lately. Don't get me wrong; he's made some fantastic saves and he's still like sort of good old Gordon, but you know for all the love that you and me, Ed personally have for him, you know, he's not like, I mean, I highly doubt he'll be playing in like until he's 45. So to get Clark locked down, I didn't really understand at first. I mean, he didn't do anything to kind of justify him being put back on the bench for Craig Gordon to come back in. I mean, I can and I can't. Ed to put it that way. But I think going beyond into the season next year, I think that's when Clark will probably start to come back in, or whether Critchley will use the same idea as Naismith had, and use him as a cup keeper. Who knows? But yeah, and especially with the rumors that were circulating that he might go to our lovely neighbours. Jenny made me feel sick. So I'm glad he's like sort of put pen to paper, and I can imagine it you are too as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think news or rumors of any player signing for Hibs is enough for them to turn around and go, actually, do you know what? I just want to stay here.
Mm.
Yeah, I think Xander's a very good goalkeeper, and I obviously I love Craig Gordon, we all do, but I think Xander is a number one in waiting, and I think
Yeah.
there's maybe an element of that. Obviously, Craig Gordon's decision will be entirely his decision to
Mm.
make. If he turns around to Critchley and says, "I think I've got another year in me," well, Xander Clark will go, "Okay, well, I'll sit on the bench then." That's how it works. Gordon is the number one at the moment, but I'm sure we'll hear more about his decision at the end of the season. Or, I don't think, put it this way, I don't think contract talks with Craig Gordon would take particularly long to do. It would be, right,
No.
how many years do you think you've got left? Right, here's a contract for that length of time.
Right.
But yeah, I think Xander is a fantastic goalkeeper. We've got two Scotland internationals, in our first and second spots, and then also got Ryan Fulton as well, who's the third choice. So what it does do is it secures that goalkeeping position at least for another few years anyway.
Absolutely. And as we said, we will keep you updated with any potential transfer news in future podcasts as well throughout this month. We will finish off on a quick preview to our next game, which is on Friday, the 17th of January, where we will head to Brechin in the fourth round of the Scottish Cup. That's the team that was it has a hedge for a stand, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, fucking beautiful stadium. So yeah, this just reeks of Brora Rangers, doesn't it? This just smells of Brora. I can feel it brewing, Alan. Like for all as much as we're about, as we're trying to be a bit more uplifting and trying to give fans hope, like this just reeks of it.
Well, that's why it's televised and all. I think the broadcasters think it reeks of it too.
I know exactly. So, just with some of the stats that you kindly sent me, lost one in 19, which is pretty darn good. Top of the league at the moment as well. And yeah, I think it'll be a bit of a spicy one. I think again for them to get the Premiership side as well, I think they'll be right up for it. I don't personally think that. Well, I'd like to think that Critchley, even with the form that we've had recently, not to be naive about it in terms of like, well, I'll just feel like was it half the team with youngsters. I hope it's a relatively strong squad, and again, for all as much as we're in a bit of a battle to climb back up the table, I'd like to think that if we do go on a bit of a cup run, that as well will slowly lift each other's confidence as well, and hopefully Critchley's as well. So um, I'd like to ask you if you have a prediction for the game, but again, I don't know if you want to jinx that or not.
I'll go for a win for the Hearts. Obviously, I think I have to. Brechin shouldn't be taken lightly, though, like you say. I was just looking at their squad because I'm sure they had some former Hearts players in there, and there's a few names. There's a few blasts of the past in their squad. There's Brad Mackay,
Oh,
there's Kevin
oh,
McCarthy, and Anthony McDonald as well.
Jesus
Another
Christ!
one. So guaranteed one of those is probably going to score a goal. But yeah, I think like you, I would not be taking them lightly. I would be going out there with as strong a team as we can. I think maybe there might be some rotations, but I think probably give Elton a start, I would suggest. Yeah, it sounds like obviously Steinfelder's not going to be here for it, but I think we might even see Lewis Nielsen get a game. Like you say, maybe Xander Clark as well. But I do think we need to go strong. I think a majority of the first team players will play. I don't think there'll be a huge amount of rotation. Probably looking at maybe 2 changes even. To be honest, I don't even think Xander will play. I think it will be Gordon that will play. But what will be. Go full strength and we win it. I'm not going to say comfortably because we don't do anything comfortably at the moment. But
Nope.
yeah, I think I'm going to go for a 2-0 win, but I'm going to go for probably quite a hard fought 2-0 win because I think Brechin will be up for it. And like I say, with it being live on a Friday night on the BBC, there's elements of they want it to be a battle, they want it to be an upset. That's why it's on council telly. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely, Alan. And I think genuinely, I think it's only going to be a scrappy. Was it a 1-0 win to Hearts? I genuinely don't think it's going to be as easy as you know. Obviously, like we have the thought of like like with the current form and where we actually are. We'll still get through it. I think we will get through it, but I don't think it's going to be easy at all. So yeah, I think a really scrappy 1-0 win. But like if it's a win, I will take it all day long. And I think that brings us to the end of this the podcast from Since I Was Young. Thank you very much for all that I've watched on our YouTube and listened to on our Spotify page. It is greatly appreciated, and for all those going to the game on Friday as well. We do hope you have a good one and make a lively noise, and hopefully to bring back a next round for us to go into the pot for the Scottish Cup. So was it from myself and Alan? We do hope you have a good one, and Alan, it was lovely to be back and speaking to you again, mate, and we will see you in the next one. You all take care. Bye for now.